This is the old style of vacuum cleaner, and as you can see, the wheels look like that. They just have a circular cutout, and that's it. And they're kind of close to the body of the vacuum, so if you were to just use a 2-inch pipe, it would hit the sides of the vacuum, and that's why you have to go to a 1.5 inch with a reducer. This is the new style of vacuum cleaner, and as you can see, there's more of a full circle, but this thing in the middle is tiered now. So people have reported that the reducer, the 2-inch to 1.5 inch coupler, no longer fits on here properly. But the thing is, you don't need it anymore because this is further away from the body, and a plain old 2-inch pipe no longer hits the side of this. So you can just use a plain old 2-inch coupler with a 2-inch pipe, and you don't need to go down to 1.5 anymore. So here it is, just using a 2-inch coupler in the wheelbase. Now you can see you do not need to go to an 1.5 inch pipe because the 2-inch does not touch the vacuum with the redesigned wheel assembly. But with just a plain old coupler, it doesn't fit snugly, as I mentioned before. And it is not very sturdy. So I am going to use the adapters that Jason mentioned in his video. These are the ones that came in the Ridgid kit. I bought some online that were the same size, but they were also loose in the wheel assembly. So the ones that were made by Ridgid are very snug. They fit in there very snug. So that's what you want. So I'm going to use hot water to heat this up. So I'm using my canning pot because I don't like the idea of boiling plastic in the pots we use for cooking because I'm sure it's going to leach some kind of plastic stuff into the water. So I only use this for canning, which means it never actually touches food. So I made it water to come up to halfway, and I'm going to boil it, and we'll see what happens. See, it's starting to give a little bit. Boiling water definitely isn't hot enough, but I did use this torch for making creme brulee. It's called a culinary torch. It worked fine. I think the trick is to really heat it up. If you find yourself forcing it over the edge, then it's not hot enough. It should just pop right on the way it did before. So it's heated up evenly, and don't just heat the end. Heat it, good halfway, and do it inside and out. Oh, there we go. Hey, look at that. Well, the key seems to be to really heat it up enough. Really heat it up a lot. There. Wow. That was the best one yet. Well, it definitely got better as it went along. So this is my first attempt, and you can see it's all like squished here. It's got this big dent in it, and didn't come out very well. And I wish I had extras of these, but I don't. And this is my last attempt. Looks pretty good. Well, I've come up with another thing of what not to do. So, the way I was using this small pipe just to make these couplers? Here's what I discovered. Just the act of me heating this and fitting it over one end of this pipe, if you look, I don't know if you could tell, but it actually shrank the end of this pipe. It actually melted this a little bit and shrank it a little. And can you see that it's a little bit tapered? So my fitting fits very easily over this little tapered end now. But on the end of the pipe that's the normal diameter, you can get it on, but it's a lot harder. It's I mean, I can probably get that on with a rubber mallet or something, but I think the bottom line is heat this and fit it onto the actual legs that you're going to be using, not a smaller pipe just for making a coupler. In Jason's video, he uses these kind of things to attach the legs to the plywood. And the first thing I learned is that if you go to Lowe's and Home Depot and stuff, the ones that they sell, there's only about 3/4 of an inch of thread here, which means if you're using 3/4 of an inch plywood, you don't have anything to stick out the other end and attach the screw cap to. So what I found is Lowe's has 2 different brands of these things. They have a big aisle with all the PVC fittings sorted by size. And when I looked for this, I found the one that had the short threads, which I couldn't use. And I looked, and I finally gave up. And as I was leaving, I saw on the other side of the aisle, all by itself, they had the Lasco brand fittings. So this is Lasco, and Lasco makes threads that are, I think they're about 1 inch long. So these are long enough for 3/4 of an inch plywood. Make sure you go with the Lasco brand. And you can find it online at Lowes.com, and it'll tell you exactly what aisle and what bay they're in. So you need the ones with the long threads. But after all that, and I had to go to a Lowe's in a different town to get these screw cap lids, I decided not to use these because the thing I don't like about this method is the only thing holding up the plywood is just this tiny little surface area right here. And it's 3/8 of an inch here and 1/4 of an inch here, but it just didn't seem like that was enough. So I'm going to use the method from John Builds It, which is where he used end caps instead of these threads. I do like the idea of sandwiching the plywood between here, but I just wish there was more surface here to hold it up. Also, even though I'm not going to use these, I'll tell you what I found out. If you're going to use these, the hole you need is 2 3/8 of an inch. I used a 2 1/4 inch hole saw bit, and it was too small. 2 1/2 is a little bit too big. So what I recommend, since I couldn't really find a 2 3/8 inch, is to use a 2 1/4 inch, make your hole, and then use a file to just enlarge the hole enough to be able to fit this through. So the hardest thing I found was trying to decide exactly where to place these things on the plywood. I try to measure the bottom of my vac, but it's kind of hard because it's not flat. But the best thing I could tell was that the center of the wheelbase on my vac, the center of each circle, is 20 inches from the diagonal counterpart and 14 inches from the adjacent counterpart. So I took my 2 feet by 2 feet plywood and I drew a line from corner to corner, and I measured 20 inches apart and symmetrical. Made a little mark. So that is where I'm going to put my cap. And on both diagonals I did that, and then I measured from here to here just to double check, and it was 14 inches. So that should be in the right place. I'll also mention that the hardware stores sell end caps which have a dome on the end. They're not flat. They also sell these flat ones. Home Depot calls them hub caps as opposed to end caps, but you have to be persistent about finding them. So what I recommend you do is you go to Lowes.com or HomeDepot.com and you find what you want and make sure the store that you live near has them in stock. Even better if you can write down the SKU number or bookmark it on your phone or whatever, because my HomeDepot.com showed they had 15 of these. And then when I went to find them in exactly the aisle in the bin, I couldn't find them. I looked at all the little containers. They didn't have this. They had it in the 3-inch size, not the 2-inch size. So I got 2 different employees to help me, and they weren't just high school kids. They were, they looked like they'd been there a while. One person said he doesn't think he sells them. He'd never seen them. Are you sure it was this store? Blah, blah, blah. And I insisted, no, online it said you had 15 of them. And we're looking, and finally the second guy saw them in a box up above where all the things are that you can buy, because they'd never been opened up and put out. So make sure online that you have them in your store, and if you do, be persistent. They're in there somewhere. But hubcaps is what Home Depot calls them. I don't know what Lowe's calls them. One thing I have to do is I have to make the legs shorter, because I found that if you have the minimal amount of distance between here and the bottom of the bucket, it means that the hose that came with the dust stopper will exactly fit. But this is too much and the hose won't fit, which is probably why Jason bought a longer hose. But you can use the one right out of the box if make that smaller. So I will be shrinking all these legs a little bit. So here's my finished product. I painted everything black. I put a little thing here for the cord, which I never use because it's always plugged in. So yeah, it's working pretty well. So I've got just a little bit of distance between the bottom of the bucket and the top of this, but it means that the hose that came with the dust stopper can fit. It's a little tight, but it's good enough. So yeah, so I'm pretty happy with how this came out. I use it all the time, and it works pretty well.